All right, Ms. Powell, I just have a few questions for you. Do you understand the nature of the charges that have been reaccused and that you would be pleading guilty to today?
I do, sir.
And you've heard all the rights that the state has gone through that you would waive by going forward with this plea. Do you still wish to waive those rights?
I do.
And are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a sufficient factual basis, that there are enough facts that support this plea of guilty?
I do.
Mr. Rafferty, are you satisfied your client is competent in understanding that the plea is voluntary and that there is a sufficient factual basis for entering this plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
I agree and find that there is a sufficient factual basis, and I find this plea of guilty to be knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently entered. There's been a request that this sentence be entered under the First Offender Act, and the court will approve that request, withhold adjudication. But I must notify you, Ms. Powell, that you are not allowed to withdraw your plea simply because you do not comply with the terms of the sentence. And the terms of that sentence would be as recommended by the parties. On count 1, conspiracy to commit intentional interference with the performance of election duties, the sentence would be 12 months probation. And counts 2 through 6 would also be 12 months probation consecutive to each other and to count 1 for a total term of essentially 6 years probation, but we're going to translate that into months for the sentence sheet. Special conditions would include a $6,000 fine with $1,000 for each count. Restitution to be paid in the amount of $2,700 to the Georgia Secretary of State's office. You are to have written a letter, which you've already satisfied. You're also to provide a recorded proffer with the state, which you've already satisfied. You're to testify truthfully against any and all co-defendants in this matter at any upcoming proceedings. You are not to have any communication with any witness, any co-defendant, or any member of the media concerning the facts or circumstances of this case. And you're to provide all documents to the district attorney's office as requested and relevant to this case.
It's a great day in America, as we just saw from that early morning revelation that there's been a plea deal and that Sidney Powell, former or current attorney for Donald Trump, one of his co-conspirators in Georgia, charged with at least 7 felony counts, has flipped on Donald Trump, will fully cooperate against them, has taken a plea deal in return for coming in early and not making the Fulton County prosecutor go through the effort of trying her at a trial that was going to start tomorrow. Sidney Powell will instead get 6 years of probation, 72 months of probation. She will have to pay a fine of $6,000. She will pay additional monies of about $2,700. She is committed to fully cooperating. It has to, as a condition of her plea, fully cooperating with the Fulton County District Attorney, and also write a letter of apology to the people of the state of Georgia and Fulton County. We're now going to talk about this and analyze it with my co-anchor. I'm Michael Popok, Legal AF, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, former prosecutor. And we got another piece of paper to talk about as part of this plea deal. Karen, what do you make of the plea? What does it do for Donald Trump, and what happens next?
Look, this is a big deal, right? She was about to start her trial with Ken Chesborough, and he didn't want to be with her. She didn't want to be with him because she's only charged with this very discrete part of the entire RICO crime, right? And that's the breaking into the Coffee County piece of this. But Bonnie Willis was going to talk about all of the case, right? And she's going to present the whole thing. And so she saw the writing on the wall. She saw that there's no way out of this. And it's clear she was going to be found guilty. And look, it's a big risk. So you can go to prison for that. And so she avoided prison. She avoided any kind of risk. There's certainty now. And so it makes sense that she pled guilty. And especially if she doesn't want to have to risk the uncertainty of a trial and potential prison sentence. So she's going to cooperate, and that is a double-edged sword because the cross-examination of her there's a lot to cross-examine. They called her team crazy, and they did it for a reason. She said and did some pretty outlandish things. So all of that's going to come out on cross. But if I was the prosecutor, I'd say, look, we didn't pick her. Donald Trump did, and Ken Chesebro did. So they picked her.
Yeah.
She's their witness, and she is what she is. But she's going to give the inside view of exactly what was said and what they did, why they went into the Coffee County, what the purpose of that was. And she's going to give the nail in the coffin to Ken Chesebro and ultimately Donald Trump later by saying, look, we were trying to steal the election.
Yeah, it goes even beyond. Yeah, you're hitting the nail right on the head. The many nails right on the head. She just doesn't have information about what she's been charged with. We always thought she skated by in the indictment, only being charged technically with the Coffee County election office break-in, is what I like to call it, although they were invited in by the election supervisor, Misty Hampton, and Kathy Latham. But she led the effort to illegally manipulate voting machines, Dominion voting machines, no less, download secret confidential voter data, and then try to use it in her lawsuits that all lost 0 to 60, and for other ways to prop up the fraud that was the big lie that Joe Biden had lost the election, especially in Georgia. She knows much more than that. We know from the Jan 6 committee report. We know from the indictment by Jack Smith and her unindicted co-conspirator status there, that she was involved from the very beginning of being one of Donald Trump's lead consiglieres and advisors about the fake elector scheme, about the efforts to seize voting machines, declare martial law, suspend the Constitution, and start making arrests in order for Donald Trump to cling to power. She was almost named a special counsel, which would be the Jack Smith equivalent, to investigate purported voter fraud when none existed. She's got a lot of dirt, a lot of tea to spill, as the kids like to say, all over Donald Trump, all over Rudy Giuliani, Ken Chesebro, Mike Roman, any other, Boris Epstein, all the other unindicted co-conspirators. This is a huge break, not just in Fani Willis's case in Fulton County, but in Jack Smith's case, because she'll now cooperate, of course, with Jack Smith. She just cooperated and has an obligation to cooperate fully and completely in truthful testimony for wherever the questions take her, and being debriefed now by Fani Willis's team. And Jack Smith's team is going to be jumping up and down saying, us too, me too, we're next. And so the Sidney Powell is a critical figure in all of this, just like a number of the key people in the Watergate trial, Ehrlichman, Haldeman, John Dean, were all critical. We still talk about them today. Sidney Powell is a huge figure. Ken Chesebro was involved with the fake elector scandal and creating the fake electors and using them to try to cling to power. Sidney Powell has her hands in so many different cookie jars and so many and fingers in so many different pies related to Donald Trump that it's just payday. It's jackpot for the prosecutors. And what do you think, Jack Smith's as prosecutor? You've been involved with cases that were duly prosecuted by competing agencies or prosecutor's office. What do you think Jack Smith does, Karen, next, knowing now that Powell has flipped on Donald Trump in the Georgia case?
Yeah, look, so it depends. We don't know if anyone else has decided to cooperate with Jack Smith. We don't know who his insiders are. He's going to decide, depending, if she's the only insider he has, he'll definitely use her for that. But, he will assess all of the various people who have either flipped or cooperated. I mean, don't forget, his case only is one, Donald Trump and 4 counts, and he has all the unindicted co-conspirators and witnesses, et cetera. So he'll assess how much he needs her and how credible she is. She is, although she's a lawyer the way others are lawyers, she's not as serious of a lawyer. She is a little bit of a crackpot. I hate to say it. Yes, she's an insider and she has a lot of information, but that plays 2 different ways. So he's not going to put on anyone he doesn't have to put on to gum up the works in his case if he has other people who are more credible. She's like Giuliani, right? he's sort of not the same Rudy Giuliani he used to be, where he was a serious lawyer. He's sort of in team crazy as well, right? And so those types of people make, they're double-edged swords to call as a witness in your case in chief, because don't forget, unlike a civil case, you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt, and you don't want to have any little doubt if you have some questionable testimony. But he could absolutely use her as an insider, if he deemed that she is credible. And that would be really the test, is he'd have to know that she's credible.
The reason I think she's so important, and I totally agree with you, credibility of a witness is always evaluated in whatever kind of case you're handling, because Donald Trump is trying to rely, or has signaled that he's trying to rely on, an advice of counsel defense. It's something that Jack Smith's trying to smoke out, because it has impacts on discovery. Because if Donald Trump is trying to rely on advice of counsel in that Jack Smith case, the Judge Chutkan case, to try to defeat mens rea, the criminal intent, criminal mind thing, one of his lawyers that he was going to rely on, that they referred to as, there were eminent and preeminent lawyers and constitutional lawyers upon which Donald Trump relied. Well, that's Ken Chesebro, Rudy Giuliani, and Sidney Powell are the first three on the Mount Rushmore of Donald Trump relying on them. And one of them now has just said, well, don't rely on me. I just pled guilty in Georgia to having tried to commit fraud and obstruction and conspiracy. And let me tell you why. What she's going to have to recant is where if she's going to tell the truth, she's going to have to recant about her beliefs and what she told Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump told her something about his knowing Joe Biden had won the election, or anything that goes to his intent and criminal mind, I think that's going to be a great day for Jack Smith, just as it's going to be a great day for Fani Willis. This is terrible for Ken Chesebro, who starts his trial allegedly on Friday. If I'm now Ken Chesebro, knowing that Sidney Powell, who he never wanted to be joined with anyway in the speedy trial case, has now flipped, and worrying because now he's got a prisoner's dilemma. He doesn't know what she's going to say about him. He keeps saying in his filings, I didn't have anything to do with her. She's really crazy. I'm not with her. But we don't know what she's saying about him and the role and how she's going to paint the entire conspiracy. So he's now got to think, and his lawyer, Scott Grubman, has to think, why don't I take a probation deal? Do I really need this? 6 years probation, maybe I get to save my law license and live to fight another day, as opposed to prison. Maybe we should take that deal. Is that still on the table? And we know it's on the table.
He's crazy not to plead.
There's a very good ex-prosecutor point and my defense attorney point. He's crazy not to plead. That's a perfect way to put it. Ken Chesebro can't go to trial. And now, as we said, we'd start hearing the flipping. Now when they're bargaining in the shadow of a jury about to be selected on the courthouse steps, that's when that concentrates the mind better than anything else about whether it's
right. That's when civil cases settle, and that's when people plead guilty.
Absolutely.
It's right before a jury gets sworn. That's when they panic and plead guilty.
And look at the big pork chop that Fani Willis is hanging out there. Probation. Come in now, everybody. You get probation. Just cooperate. That's better than prison time. The bail bondsman who pled 2 weeks ago, he got probation, and he's going to testify about everything in Coffee County in the conspiracy. And she's building her case. She's stacking up her witnesses to use in the ultimate case against Donald Trump, which, if this case settles and doesn't take the 5 months that the judge was going to instruct the jury about, let's say these two cases resolve, because the indictments are going to be dismissed. Just to go through the steps here, she pled on the video that we just saw. She will be treated as a first-time offender. The judge will accept the probation recommendation by the prosecutor's office on the condition of full cooperation and that letter, the apology letter being written, and then he will dismiss the indictment against her. If that happens against Ken Chesebro, suddenly the calendar has opened wide in Fulton County, and now Fani Willis is able to argue that it's time to call up Donald Trump's trial for the beginning of 2024, as opposed to late in the spring or summer, which is what we were worried about with 5 months. So this has a domino effect. This plea deal right now, as we've outlined it, impacts the prosecution in the District of Columbia and Jack Smith. Helps to defeat the attorney reliance on advice of counsel defense that Donald Trump was considering because one of his counsel just pled guilty, impacts Ken Chesebro and his decision-making as to whether he wants to be tried at all or just take probation and go home, and Fani Willis's ability to try the Trump case when it matters before the election. I mean, just an amazing set of ramifications and developments. I mean, I thought one of these two were going to flip. Remember, you and I, Karen, talked about it on the midweek edition of Legal AF. We talked about that they had announced in court 2 weeks ago that there were plea deals being offered to other people. And the judge asked, how about Chesebro and Powell? Have plea deals been offered to them? And they said, we're getting around to it, Judge. We're going to be offering them plea deals. So we're not shocked that she's had 2 weeks to think about this. And now with a jury being picked tomorrow, boom, here we are. Any final thoughts, Karen, about what do you think the ramifications of Sidney Powell, particularly cooperating with prosecutors, is?
Yeah, so two things. Number one, if this does go to trial tomorrow and Ken Chesebro does have his trial, it's going to be televised, as we know. And Jack Smith, it's great for Jack Smith because he's going to watch all of the witnesses and see how they do. He gets to test drive Sidney Powell as a witness, see how she does being cross-examined, and all of the other witnesses that Fani Willis has. And so he can decide, it's like a dress rehearsal. He can decide which ones hold up under cross-examination, which ones are effective, which ones are credible, and which ones don't. And he doesn't have to call every single one of them. So in some ways, this is great for him to see how this goes and how it does. And the only other thing I just want to clarify is that Sidney Powell's indictment will be dismissed. That doesn't mean she's not going to have a criminal record. That's just a technicality in order to allow her to plead guilty and to enter, to allow her to be charged with an accusatory instrument that's not an indictment. And so it's just a technicality. She will have a criminal record and she will be held accountable for what she did. So that's the only other thing I wanted to clarify.
And it's a very important thing. And she's now going to have to talk to the Texas bar, who either by a complaint being filed or on their own are now going to call her up because she's just pled guilty or has a criminal record, as you outlined it. And that's being a person that's held his bar license for 32 years successfully, and you too, Karen. That's something you don't want to have to face a bar examiner, a bar regulator about, and to try to defend your bar license. And it's her own doing. It's not like she can argue, it's a witch hunt in Georgia. She pled guilty and took a deal. And so she'll have to deal with that wherever she's admitted into the bar. This is an example of what Karen, me, and Ben Meiselas, the three leaders of Legal AF, do every week, twice a week, plus hot takes, only on the MeidasTouch network. We do it on a show called Legal AF. And yes, it's what you think. It's every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then on audio platforms wherever you can get it, exclusively on the MeidasTouch network. You're watching us on that YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed, free subscribe. Help them get to 2 million free subscribers. The bigger they get, the more your voice is heard, and we'll continue to report at the intersection of law, justice, and politics. Only one place, MeidasTouch Network. Michael Popok, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, co-anchors of Legal AF, signing off for now on the plea deal struck by Sidney Powell in Georgia, Fulton County today, and its impacts reverberate throughout all the jurisdictions in which Donald Trump is being prosecuted.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.